And we're live. What's up, YouTube? Welcome to my second stream on this channel. So today I am joined by some amazing guests. Some are old friends, some are new friends. Today we're going to be talking about how to choose between grad schools. So when you're applying to grad school or you're trying to decide between grad schools, there are many things to take into account, many factors at play, and sometimes these will clash and you have to make good decisions in order to choose the right grad school for you. So today I'm joined by, let me introduce them as they appear here on the stream. So first is George Iskandar. So how's it going, George? Thank you for joining me. So George is a PhD student at the University of Chicago, and I'm going to let him say a few words on his research.
Yeah, well, hi, everybody. So Ibrahim said everything. I mean, I'm a first year, so, new to this whole grad school thing. Yeah, and so I'm right now working on atomic clock detection of dark matter. It's something, I'm like new to the group, still learning a lot about it, but something I'm excited about.
That's awesome. Next up is Jacob. So Jacob and I go back to 2017. We did an RU together at Michigan State, and he also goes to Michigan State now. So Jacob, thank you for joining.
Oh, my pleasure.
What kind of research are you doing now?
So I do research in quantum algorithms for quantum computing.
Yeah, so I think at first you started something with nuclear physics and then you switched to quantum computing?
That's right, yeah. So, but going into grad school, I really didn't know that much about quantum computing. So there was a grad student in my office actually who was in nuclear but doing quantum computing, and it seemed really interesting, and so I just kind of kept going with it.
Yeah, that's an important thing that will probably come up later. That's something about research in grad school. So next up we have Jem. Jem, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
So Jem is a second year here at Michigan. She does high energy experimental physics with the Atlas Group. Jem, thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you.
What kind of research do you focus on in Atlas? What are you looking for?
Okay, so I'm looking for di-Higgs decays, and one of them decays to like 2 B quarks and 2 tau leptons. So I'm currently working on the analysis part of that, and I'm just starting. I'm a second year grad student, so I'll learn more this year.
And if people don't know what Atlas is, you should Google CERN or the LHC, and you should Google is Atlas bigger than CMS? Which one's bigger?
Oh, there's a huge debate right there. You need to make another video on that.
All right, that's a different debate. I'll leave that for later.
Yes.
Okay. Next up, last but not least, we have Annie. Annie, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
She is in the Astro department here in Michigan, and she's also a second year. And tell us about your research.
Yeah, I do high energy spectroscopy. So I use X-rays of the halos of galaxy groups and clusters to understand better their metallicity and where the metals come from in the universe.
Probably going to have to listen to that again, and so I can absorb it completely. Or maybe I'll read your paper, and then that'll make sense to me. All right. So we can just chat a bit as more people join in. But so basically how this is going to go is I have around 7 items that I want to talk about with you. And basically we're going to go through them. I'm going to ask each of you to give their opinion on it. Whether you think it's an important thing that you factor when you go into grad school, or whether it's something that you rank low on your ranking. So the first thing we want to talk about is prestige. So let me say a few words about this. A school has a name, right? And that name is usually known in the public opinion or the public knowledge. Like if you hear a school's name, you can say, oh yeah, I know that school, and it's a big name. And then there are schools that are, well, not that known, but they might be doing some great things. So the big question is, when someone applies to grad school, should they aim for like the big name schools, or should they look for something else? And this is going to tie to what you want to do after grad school as well. So I want you to first tell me, what do you want to do after grad school? Do you want to do the academia route, or do you want to do the industry route? And maybe this will give some context to your answers. So George, what are your plans sort of after grad school?
Me? So, still up in the air, but I think like really ideally, I would like to be a professor at some point, or, alternatively like a scientist at a national lab. I think both of those are like really exciting types of research careers.
So you're leaning academia for now?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. What about you, Jacob?
So When it comes to quantum computing, it's kind of interesting. So there's a really big industry component to research. So some options I've considered are trying to get a postdoc or research opportunity at IBM or Google, or one of these other companies. I think ultimately, though, in the long term, I really like actually having a strong teaching component. I found being like a TA, and having some other teaching experiences, that's something that I really enjoy. I enjoy that interaction with students, and so I'm also still up in the air, even though I'm a third year. But I think that I'm what I'm sort of thinking about is how much of a teaching component do I want in my future? So I think I could maybe go to a more teacher centric university, or maybe go for one of these like industry research type positions. Still thinking about it.
Yeah, and you can end up with sort of the two worlds, like as you were saying, if you end up with in a research position at some industry. So you would be doing the research that you always wanted to do, but also you're at some industry not tied down to a university.
Right.
So that's, yeah. Quantum computing does give you that potential to do that. Jen, what about you?
All right, so this is the $1 million question that so many people ask me about. Like, what do you want to do, industry or academia? So I would say that since I'm just, you would call like a baby grad student, I'm still a bit far off. I would say that maybe both. But now that I think about it more, like experimental particle physics is just so rich. Like there's so many topics, so many ideas that you could explore. So that is very interesting to go to if I want to go to academia. But at the same time, like it has a lot of applications with like data analysis, statistics, machine learning, and also computer networks. So there's a lot of things to think about. But I would say that if I do either academia or industry, I feel like there's like a lot of avenues to try to go to.
Yeah, and like you said, you have those skills that are transferable to the industry. So they're always
Definitely.
flexible. Yeah.
Yep.
Annie, what about you?
Originally, I really wanted to do academia because I know I love teaching. I love the outreach component. I love working with people. But after these last 2 years, I honestly think I'm leaning more towards industry of some sort. I know NASA has a high energy division, so I would be happy working there. Some of my old advisors work at the Center for Astrophysics in Boston, Massachusetts, which actually runs one of the X-ray telescopes I use. So that would be a lot of fun to get to go to. I want to stay in astronomy in some capacity, but I want it to be not quite as focused as the academia world, especially with writing proposals and grants all the time, always asking for money. It's just a little too investive of my life for me, I think.
Yeah, you brought up the pros and cons, I guess, of academia. It's that that usually people don't mention a lot. So that's a good thing. So now that we have some context of what people want to do, so for example, I'm leaning towards academia definitely. But like Jem said, I think I'm building up skills that would make me transferable to industry. So I can always move around if academia doesn't work. But I think I do lean towards academia for now. So given that, how much does prestige factor in? So Jacob.
Sure. Yeah. So thinking about your question, I think it really depends a lot on the person. I think you have to think about what your goals are. Are your goals to try to become a professor at like an Ivy League college? In that case, to me, it seems statistically that it's rare for someone to get that position going to a less prestigious school. So on the other hand, if you are hoping to get your PhD and then go to maybe like a 4-year liberal arts college, or maybe you just want to become a high school teacher, or maybe you want to do something completely different after you graduate, then I think this factor was probably less important, because you have to compare it to some of these other things, like, are you going to be happy where you live, or what about the community, right? So I think prestige definitely has its benefits. And I think those benefits are kind of depend on the person. For me, it was really important initially. So I don't consider MSU prestigious in every area. I think for nuclear, it's prestigious, but I don't think it quite has the eye in the public as Harvard or Stanford. But now that I'm sort of considering my career paths, I think I'm realizing, like, I don't think the prestige has really affected what I'm doing. So so it really depends on the person, I think.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I initially asked you about what your end goal is, because I think prestige plays an important role once you graduate and if you want to go to academia. So there's this statistic about most professors being from certain types of schools that I probably have to look up so I don't butcher. But so, George, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to mention exactly what you mentioned. Like, there is that statistic that like a lot of faculty at different schools like do tend to come from like more prestigious like physics programs or astro programs, which I think is like an unfortunate reality. So, but like Jacob said, like it really depends on the person, right? Like if you're really like gung ho about, you know, oh, I want to be like a professor, or you know, I want this like prestigious position, then like the name can open doors for you. But you know, I think a lot of people have this mindset where like prestige, you know, has to come at the expense of everything else. Like, you know, I need prestige, you know, it doesn't matter like where I live or like what the program's like, you know. And you know, I think that's definitely a flawed way of looking at it, because, you know, it can be important and that's fine. But, you know, I think people really underestimate like the commitment of grad school. You know, it's like 5+ years, you know, and you really give up like a lot of time, effort in your life for it. So if you go for a prestigious program that's not necessarily suited for you, then, you know, you might not necessarily have like a great time, right? So it is a factor to consider depending on your goals for sure, but don't let it come at the expense of everything else. You know what I mean? Like think about the other things that go into making the decision, not just prestige, because if you just do that, then you're not going to end up making like the best decision for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some people just have this in mind that, oh, I have to go to a prestigious university, whatever it is, I have to go to that big name, and you know, whatever for whatever reason, like so they could, you know, show off to their cousin or something. I don't know, but Annie, what do you think about prestige?
I have to second what was just said. I think less of prestige. I think it's more of a big fish in a little pond versus little fish in a big pond kind of thing. Like you want to go somewhere where you are going to succeed. And sometimes that's not the most prestigious school. Like I have a friend who did an REU at a very prestigious school, and she ended up having a miserable time and I think almost dropped the REU. And I've also heard some not great things about some of the programs for the very prestigious schools. So, you know, to me, if you go to a program where you can do well, make the connections you need, be successful, I think you'll be just fine. And I weigh being happier and sane mentally above the name of a school anytime.
Jem, do you have any contrary opinion or?
Well, definitely I agree with everything that they said, but whenever I think of prestige, I always think that probably they are referring to like the credibility of like the professors in that program. So it does make sense that you ask us, oh, do you want to go to academia or industry? Because like whenever they ask like, oh, which school did you come from? Like I feel like if you're going to pursue academia, like it matters who your thesis advisor is, what did you work on, like the connections that you're going to get. So I think in that part, I think prestige does matter. And I guess like, again, and another topic of prestige would be like the resources of the department, not only specifically to like the students, but also like how much funding does the department have? Like do you have to teach, or like or are you guaranteed research position at the beginning? Because research sounds good at the beginning, but it would be good to teach too, because I think it's a really good experience. So I guess that's just, the pros of going to a prestige. But I have a con about prestige, because for example, let's say you have a very good Ivy League school, like prestige school, and then you have a maybe less ranked but still good, but then that top school is not really known for sciences but for humanities, but you want to go into the sciences, and like the other very like less ranked but really good school is like just very known for sciences. So you just not only have to think about the name but what they're actually good for. So that's something that's good to
Yeah, that's some great points. I just want to tell the people who are watching right now, if you have any opinions on anything or you have any questions, do leave them in the comments and we will probably take them as we go. So I think we said a lot about prestige. I think there's a common opinion that prestige does matter when it comes to thinking about if you want to go to academia, if you want to have some advisor that's maybe very well known, but you should not rank it so highly that you are blinded to everything else. You have to take into account the rest of the things that we're going to talk about. And so coming up next is going to be research. So, okay, I'm going to start off with this one. I think for me, research is probably the most important. Maybe I spoke too soon, but I just said it, so I'm going to stick with it. So research to me is probably the most important because I'm doing a PhD, and a PhD is sort of defined by its research. So if I'm going somewhere and the research is subpar or not what I like, then what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this PhD? That's why I sort of rank research extremely highly. But I'd love to hear, Annie, your thoughts on research. How do you rank research?
I would rank it pretty high. I think that, and maybe you'll get to it later, but your advisor is
right.
really important.
Let's call it research advisor.
Yeah. Someone who you pair up with for all 5 or 6 years. And I think those really go hand in hand because your advisor can make those connections. They can make or break your grad school experience. And then Jem brought up the resources of the school too. Like if you don't have access to all of the like archival libraries that you need for data, you're not going to have a good time. And you're studying this one thing for 6 years. You need to be able to pursue the avenue that you want in the end and build that research independence from your advisor. But you still need to have those resources and the ability to go in that direction that you want and to be interested in it for so long. So I think it's extremely important. And like if you're picking a grad school, you need to make sure that there are several different options at that one school. Because if you put all your eggs in one basket and then it turns out you don't get along with that advisor, then it's not a good time and you've got to completely figure out a new direction to go in.
That's a great point. I'll talk about what happened to me with research, but first I want to hear from George. How do you rank research?
Hey, so I think it's pretty important for sure. I mean, just to echo what you guys said, I mean, you said it perfectly. Like, you know, you're here at a PhD program, you know, to do research, to learn how to be a researcher. So you want something that's exciting for you and, you know, that's in your field of interest, right? Like you don't want to do something unrelated or that you don't want to do. I guess one thing to add to research is I think a lot, and this comes from my personal experience, but I think a lot of people think sometimes like, okay, the research has to be at the university, but a lot of times universities have a lot of cool research collaborations with like other universities or like national labs that are worth checking out. And for me personally, like my advisor's at Argonne National Labs, like he's not at the university. And, you know, I found there was a lot of cool research at the national labs that aligned with what I wanted to do. And I think there's a bazillion different national labs in the US. So, you know, schools that are near them oftentimes have a lot of cool projects that students don't even consider. So, I mean, I'll just say that, you know, when considering research, you know, it's important and also consider all the research that's available, not just at the university, but in collaborations at national labs, et cetera. Exactly.
Jem, what do you think about research?
So I think I put this really highly when I was choosing a grad school. So whenever I did the grad school tour, I would ask each professor, so what is actually the opportunities or what can I do specifically for Atlas, because we always go to CERN, right? And so I'm not doing a sponsorship for Michigan, but if you ever go to Michigan, I feel like Michigan has one of like the largest particle physics groups because they have a lot of resources to bring you to CERN for as long as you want. The moment that you become a candidate, you could stay there until you graduate, basically. And so in some schools, that's not possible. So what I'm just saying is like, there's that huge flexibility in my research group for me to like go back and forth or like do whatever I want. And I think so that is something that I was factoring in when I was going to grad school.
So flexibility has been brought up a couple of times. And so there's sometimes when you're considering a grad school, there's the options that you have, but there's also sometimes that there's a particular research project that you're really interested in. So there's these two things that sometimes compete is that do you want options that you can choose later on, or do you want to go to a particular grad school where you know you're going to do this, X, Y, Z, and like you have that set in mind? Jacob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I really like how Jem emphasized like the resources that a grad school has. I think that you can sort of define your own trajectory provided that you have access to the resources you need. And so if your school already has these connections, then that's really great. I also like how Annie was focused on the advisor, because I think for me, that is super important in the sense that I think I could have worked on a variety of different projects, as long as like the work environment I was a part of was pretty good, because I don't really think it was destiny that I ended up in quantum computing or anything like that. I think that was a lot of circumstance, but I'm really glad that I'm doing it with an advisor that I like, and I think that's pretty lucky. And so yeah, so that's a really important aspect, I think, of research, having a good advisor, and having an advisor that sort of kind of matches with you in a good way. So it's a much more personal relationship, and one that lasts a long time. And so if you can kind of have a good working dynamic, then I think that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So having a good advisor that you're sort of on the same wavelength with is really important for, first, your well-being in grad school, and then second, just doing some high-quality research with them. You can bounce ideas off each other, and they can guide you in the proper way, rather than maybe some advisors just leave you to do whatever and they don't check up on you, for example. So choosing the right advisor is really important. And so talking about having options, so when I came into Michigan, I was trying to do particle cosmology, leading cosmology, but then I couldn't find an advisor in cosmology, so I switched to particle physics, and I'm still happy in just pure particle physics. So it was great that at Michigan I had the choices to pick between cosmology, particle physics, and they were all pretty good choices. So that's why it's important to have choices. So we have a question from Shantanu, and the question is, what are your thoughts on larger versus smaller groups in the same institution? Same question goes for newer versus well-established PIs. Let's see who wants to go first. Okay, I'll pick. Let's see, Jen.
All
take
right.
it away.
Okay, first question. Thoughts on larger versus smaller groups. So I think it has pros and cons, because I'm in a very large, huge group.
The biggest.
Yes, like if I publish a paper in Atlas, it's like Star Wars, where you can have like so many authors like down like probably 5-10 pages. Anyway, so what's nice about a large group is that you can just collaborate with so much people. Like I talk to people from Taiwan, from like Italy, from like just all over the world, just because they're in the same analysis group. And I think that's fun, meeting new people and their experiences. But sometimes, I guess now I'm gonna go to the cons, is that like if you have in a large group, how do you distinguish like what is your contribution in the group? Because for example, I'm doing an analysis. Oh, I did a small part in the analysis just because it's so huge. So now the pro for a smaller group is that, if you're working in a smaller group, then I guess you can show more like what you've did, your contribution in the group. And it's also probably like tight knit, and like you will know each other immediately, because there's also some people that I don't know, or I haven't met. I just know them by name because it's just a huge collaboration. So I guess you could be sure with a smaller group, you can get to know the people immediately. Okay, next question. Newer and well-established PIs. Oh, there's also a lot of pros and cons there. I'll just give a few then. So if you're a new PI, I guess you'll have the energy, right? Because I feel like you're same as that new grad student, that you're trying to prove yourself, that you're trying to like get tenure, or like whatever your goal is in your like professorship career. But then if you're a well-established PI, I guess I'm not really sure if like you're more relaxed or more, because you're more established now, like you've proven yourself. So I guess I don't know like how that pace is. So I guess the pace between newer and
the well-established are probably have more connections, that they've been in the field for much longer, whereas like you said, the newer PI has a lot of energy coming in. They have a lot of new ideas. So Annie, do you have any thoughts on the PI?
I actually went through this exact debate when I was choosing my advisor, because I was either going with my current advisor, who is, I won't say anything else. He's older and well established. Oh, sorry, Joel. I love Joel. I love working with Joel. But on the other hand, there was this really cool young woman who was like her first year teaching, and I would have been her very first grad student. And I saw that as an exciting opportunity, but you don't, like, one of the questions like that you want to talk to your, like when choosing an advisor, is what is their research style? But you have 3K people. Holy crap. I'm also laughing at that because like my collaboration group is literally me and my advisor. And so I was like, is that right?
I had to put that up.
That's so many.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess when talking to people, like try and choose your advisor, you need to know like their advising styles, and you have no idea what that's like for a brand new professor. And so I was a little hesitant about that, but she is wonderful. I think I would have gotten along great with either one of them. For me, it came down to what research I wanted to do. And the advisor I picked had my dream research and something I was familiar with, really wanted to keep going, just work at like literally different size scales in the universe. And so I got to do that. And I really do enjoy where I'm at. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I think it comes down more to the personality, whether that works. And don't be afraid to like ask them, like, how would you want to schedule your time working with me? Like one-on-one weekly meetings, just group meetings, kind of leave me to be, and I'll come ask you when I'm like completely lost down a rabbit hole. So, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes having a well-established advisor does not necessarily mean that they're not generating newer ideas. Like there are a lot of people a lot of advisors who are still active well until, to the end of their career or whatever. So unless George or Jacob, do you have any input? Otherwise, we can move on to number 3.
I think everybody said.
Yeah, I think I just add that a lot of this is also sub-discipline specific. So if you go into solid state physics, you want to work in big groups, you'll probably have a smaller group. That's just sort of the nature of it. Or if you're in particle physics, maybe you have like an actual small group, but then the big project you're working on obviously is huge. So just keep that in mind too. If you're torn between a couple different areas and that's the deciding factor, then there are these differences based on the kind of work you do.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. So now let's move on to number 3, which is the climate in the department. So I think this one, I kind of know what everyone's going to say, but I just want to hear it. So George, start us off.
Great. So, yeah, I think this is pretty important too. I think like most of my answers can be summed up by like, you want to choose a place that, provides you with like a comfortable lifestyle because, undergrad is already like pretty stressful. Like it's 4 years of stress. You don't want to do that for like another like half decade essentially. Make life easier for yourself. And climate definitely, plays a part in that, like when I was making my decision, I really liked the school because, it felt like the students really cared, like they did like a lot of outreach during like the visit days. And well, I mean, my visit days were all virtual. I should say that from the outset, but they like did like a lot of like info sessions. We had plenty of chances to talk to the students, and I sensed that they were like genuinely really helpful and happy with their life there, and they really wanted to help the incoming students make a good decision, right? And now that I'm here, I sense that everybody's like pretty happy. Everybody's really nice, helpful. Like anytime I have a question and I ask the older students, they always have an answer for me. They're happy to talk to me, and that helps me, right? Like you don't want to talk to an older student and they, like aren't nice to you essentially. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty important. I think this is one of those things you just can't dismiss or like, put at the bottom, right? Like, you don't want to go to a place where like people disrespect you or, there's like, cause like we heard horror stories about like what goes on and sometimes in academia, and, you don't want to put yourself in an environment like that, right? Like there's definitely plenty of places that have like, respectful people and people who are nice and you want to be there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's really important that once you get accepted to a university and they either do a virtual or a live recruitment event, that there you're going to interact with the grad students, you're going to interact with the faculty, and you're going to get a feeling for the climate. And that is going to be a very important thing to factor in your decision. So I don't know if Jem, did you experience anything that was good or bad during recruitment?
Oh, during recruitment, I guess like I just went to a couple of recruitment places. So I mean, like if I ask like students about like the climate of the department.
Yeah, like what if you did you get some good feelings from the grad students at a particular university, and then that influenced your decision, versus you got a negative vibe from some other department, and you're like, I don't know if I want to go there.
Oh yeah. So I went to this university one, and then I told them, oh, these are the universities I'm looking at, and they told me, oh, if you got into this university, just go there. Flat out told me. So there are some students who told me that, and like I specifically asked them that, oh, what do you think of like the department, the professor? Because like just think about it, you're going to go to university for the next 5 years or 6 years, depending on your research, and like you would I know that research is important, but at the same time, like again, Annie said earlier, your well-being, like, are you gonna stay sane for the rest of your program? Like, you have like support groups that you could rely on, and that's really important aside from your research as well and your advisor. So that's something that you should definitely take note of.
Annie, what do you think about the climate in the department?
Yeah, I was going to ask if I could tell like a quick horror story that like
Go ahead.
I was touring grad schools, and like it was the grad students and the climate that made me fall in love with Michigan. And I was like, if I get in, I know that's the place I'm going to go, which was great because I got in after being waitlisted, but I still got in. But I was touring a different school. I won't say the school, but I was there. It was our very first night. They took us out to a restaurant, which was great. But it's a seafood restaurant, and I'm allergic to seafood. And I went to the people, and I was like, hey, I can't eat any of this. And they're like, no, you'll be fine. I was like, no, I won't. Like, that's not your, I know you've got PhDs, but it's not the quite right PhD for you to make this decision. So it was horrible. Like, they would not feed me that night. And then there was this one super nice professor there who was actually like, can I get you some food? And like, I had to go elsewhere for dinner, but it was the first night, and I'd already made my decision that I was not going to that school.
If you are a graduate chair, take notes. Pay attention to these things.
Oh yeah.
Jacob, how much do you value the climate in the department?
So much. Just
you can stop there. That's it.
I'll keep it short. I'll keep it short. I think this is maybe the most important thing for me. I have to maybe go through the list real quick and check, but this might be the most important thing for me personally. I think for me, I value a lot of things I do outside of work, and that can involve interacting with other students who are going to be, the first source you look for friends in the new place you're living, right? So, especially if you're going to grad school far away from home. So, I think this is really important. And unfortunately, I think it's maybe the hardest to get an accurate sense of, because you can, these other things we've talked about, like prestige, you maybe already have a sense of what the prestige is. You can kind of more readily look up things like research, but climate, definitely pay attention to your visit days. And if you have the opportunity to interact with the students in less formal interactions, for example, talking to students that aren't directly volunteering in the visit day, I think that can be very helpful. I was thankful to have some interactions like that during my visit days. And just keep in mind that for visit days, the people who are volunteering are often the ones who are the happiest and like most excited to meet people and promote the school. So not to say they're bad or trying to trick you, but you're definitely getting a certain cross section of the department. So
yeah, so keep in mind the selection bias sometimes. Just because you see that, oh, these grad students are really happy and they're trying to get me to go here. Well, are these the only grad students here? Do I have to talk with someone else? Yeah, so that's a great point.
Is there something hidden in the basement or something?
Yeah,
exactly. Like, you should always talk to the most miserable, and then
not just because they're in the lab, but because they're being kept there.
All right. So we've gone through the first three. Now we move on to number 4. Of course, these are not in any particular order. I just have them in this order, but the rankings obviously are going to change depending on the person. But here I have number 4, which is stipend, cost of living, and funding. So let's start with Jem. Or let me say a few words first on stipend and cost of living. So when you get accepted to a grad school, typically you need funding, which means you need money, which means you need to get paid somehow. And usually the ways to get paid are either you teach, So you're known as a teacher's assistant or a GSI, graduate student instructor, or whatever colleges are naming them these days. And then, so that's the first way of getting paid. The other way is doing research, being sponsored by some advisor. So they have some money, they wrote a grant, they got some grant money, and they're like, okay, I have some money, here you go, do some research for me. And you'd be known as a graduate research assistant. And then the last way of getting money is through a fellowship. So sometimes departments have their own fellowships that you can apply to. And sometimes there are wider fellowships that are sort of national fellowships, like the NSF, the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, which I've made a video on before. You should go definitely check that out. But so yeah, there's the NSF GRFP. So these are the three main ways of getting money. You either teach, you do research, or you get a fellowship. So now that that's out, we obviously care about getting paid and we want to live. So Jem, what do you think about funding? Is that something that's important you consider?
It's very important. I could not stress enough. You have to understand how much your value is important. Well, so I guess story-wise, so a friend of mine got into a college somewhere in Chicago, in Illinois. Okay, I don't know which university. But then so the stipend was less than $20K. And for a year. So I'm now this is where we have to think about, okay, is this actually gonna make you alive per month? Is that even enough? So I guess when I heard that story, I was mortified. So when I got into the schools, I made a spreadsheet. Okay, how much does each school give me? And actually somebody taught me that if you one school and then some other schools are giving you a certain amount of money, you could negotiate. That's an option, guys. And so definitely very important for the stipend, because you need money to continue. And especially I'm an international student, I don't really have immediate family nearby. So if something happens, I need to make sure that I got myself covered. If I call my parents, it's going to be 1,000 miles away. They can't really send me help immediately. So that's definitely important. And then as for funding, Ibrahim mentioned you have either teaching or research assistant. So when I got into the schools, I made sure okay, so if I get in here, do I have to teach the whole time that I'm in the PhD program, or is there some type of guaranteed funding? So for example, just specifically for Atlas, once you become a candidate, which means that you finish all of your course requirements and your exams, you officially you don't have to teach anymore. So in my brain, that after candidacy means no teaching. But then I talked to Ibrahim the other day and oh, I didn't realize that you still have to teach afterwards. So I'm so sorry about that. So in my case, I have guaranteed research funding. And you mentioned about fellowships, right? So something to take note about, I'm international student, so I can't apply, I'm not a US citizen, so I can't apply to an NSF. So in this case, I have to look for some other fellowships that are applicable to international students. And to be honest, there's not a lot of them. So I guess you just have to do a bit more research and Googling which fellowship would be applicable for you.
Yeah, I think you raised some very, very important points, especially for international students, that this is something they have to take into account. They have to think about really well, is that if you're an international student, you have to think about, how much are they paying me? How much do I have to pay for rent and to live here? So very good points. Let's see, George, do you have any strong opinions on funding?
Yeah, definitely. I think this has to be close to the top for me, just because you said it really well, Jem. You want to make sure you can live, right? Not just live out the stereotype of eating ramen each day, but I think there's a lot that goes into it too. It's not just the face value of the stipend they give you, but also look up things like health benefits and whatnot. You want to are they giving you health benefits at all? What's covered? That's all really important, right? Because God forbid, you don't know what could happen, right? So having that as a grad student and not having to pay out of pocket is definitely really important. So look at what the entire stipend is offering and what the conditions are. Because again, that's important, right? They could give you a good stipend, but then I guess the conditions depend, right? For me, I'm really lucky because when I TA'd last quarter, I only had to TA one class. Some other schools I've heard, you might have to TA multiple classes at a time to get your stipend. And on top of your classes and your research, that can just be really overwhelming. So, talk to the students to get a sense of if you're being funded through a TA-ship, what does that mean, right? What is the workload, right? Because they may say, oh, it's only 10 hours a week, but it could be way more, right? You don't know. So yeah, definitely important, relative to cost of living too, like if you're in the Bay Area, stipend's not going to really stretch. Whereas like if you're in like a more suburban place, it'll go far, like further, you know. So again, don't just look at the money, but look at the area, and look at where like typical students are living. In some places, students are like living in like university housing because like the local cost of living is too high. In other places, students just rent out their own apartments. Again, do your research on that because, like ideally, you want to, have, what's best for you, right? So big factor, and like it pays off to do your research in this area, right? And not just look at the money they're giving you each year.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point on looking at the benefits that they give you as well, not just the raw value of money that they give you, as because sometimes if you're given a stipend but no healthcare, then that's a big red flag, right? Because the cost of health, you can't put a number on healthcare sometimes. So that's why it's important to look at the benefits that they give you, which is a really good point. Jacob, do you have something to add?
Yeah. So I guess one thing I'm thinking about is, to me, it seems that the amount that schools pay you, it depends on the person, depends on the school you're going to, but I think the much bigger standard deviation comes from the cost of the place you're living. So that's, to me, I think that's the simplest rule of thumb. If you want to know how far your money is going to go, it's going to typically depend on where you live. I live in Lansing, Michigan. It's not the prettiest city, but it sure is cheap. So I'm really able to live a pretty. I'm kind of frugal, but I don't have to eat ramen every night, like George mentioned. I really don't want to do that for 6 years. And I think also for me, a question you might want to ask yourself is, are the students unionized? Because that can really be correlated with how many benefits the students have and how much pay do they have relative to the cost of living in the area. And a union can also, at least at my school, if students are being asked to work more hours than they should be, more than whatever the prescribed amount is, like 20 hours a week, then they can file a complaint with the union, and the union can take action on the behalf of that student. So for me, I think that's something that can be really important and valuable to consider, is if there's some sort of organized action on behalf of the students to sort of raise their standard of living.
So I don't want to make this specific, but Annie, how's it living in Ann Arbor?
I love Ann Arbor, honestly. Well, okay. Like my life story is a little different. This was my 13th move coming here. So for me, like I needed to find some place where I could settle down and not feel bored. Honestly, not feel like I'm going to have to get up and go and like be antsy after 2 years, which is what I've been doing my entire life. And I'm having a lot of fun in Ann Arbor, like despite the pandemic. It's still gorgeous to go and walk around. I live in one of the more hip areas, like kind of downtown. So there's a farmer's market 2 blocks away from my apartment every Saturday. There's parks everywhere. I mean, Michigan itself is, I think, gorgeous. I like the cold too. So sue me, but I love
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up about funding, though, is how many years your program will cover. Because some programs only will cover like 3 or 4 years. Some will cover 5 or 6, or like the whole time you're there. But like, if your program only is like, oh, we'll only cover you 3 or 4 years, like the last couple of years you're there, you're going to be strapped, sending in so many fellowship applications, and it's going to suck.
Yeah, definitely read those acceptance letters carefully and see exactly what they say, word for word. What's guaranteed, what's not. Right? So make sure you read that carefully. Here's a question that we may or may not know the answer to. Do they allow you to do side hustle or something else to earn extra cash as an international student in grad school? Jem, any thoughts?
My answer would be no, because you might get in trouble in the future if you work outside of the university. So I would say it is the same rules as an undergrad. So I'm under an F1 visa, so that is the visa for international students in the US who are studying, and it's the same for both undergrad and graduate school. So yes, the rules are the same. I would advise you not to do any side hustle or work outside the university, because I would say that in the future you might get in trouble, and we don't want that for you. That's all I can say.
All right, sounds good. So now we're going to move on to the fifth item. And so I'm seeing a lot of comments, and the reason I'm not showing every single one is sometimes they're not directly related to the point we're talking about. So at the very end, after we go through all 7 points, I'll then go back and bring back the previous comments, and then we can talk about them. So for now, we're going to move on to number 5, which is collaboration opportunities. And so I think I saw this on Twitter. Let me pull it up. But so before I pull up where I saw this, how important is it to have collaboration opportunities? So let me see. For theoretical physics, having a collaboration is important if you can, you're working on a problem and you're working on a particular small subset of it, but you're not exactly sure how to get the whole result, and you need some help from people in different universities. So having that collaboration opportunity would be great. Sometimes if you're working alone in your own group and you're not talking with other people outside of maybe your local group or your university, then that might hinder you. You might not know what's going on. You might lose on opportunities. So I want to know, George, what do you think about collaboration opportunities?
Yeah, so I think it's important, though. I think this is something I would actually have to really think about a little bit more, because I think it depends on the subfield. But I'll say for me it was important because I ultimately chose Chicago because of its proximity to Fermilab and Argonne, and I saw that they both had like a lot of like cool collaborations going on with the university, and you can like work with them. So I said, okay, that's cool, and like essentially like like 3 universities worth of like research opportunities. So that was important for me, right? Like the ability to collaborate with groups outside of the university. Yeah, I think it's really dependent on your subfield too, like whether you're in like an atlas like Jem, or you're doing like more theoretical stuff like Ibrahim, and I wouldn't know the exact answer to different subfields, but I think it's definitely worth looking at, and it's not something that hurts, right? Like more collaboration, you're not going to suffer because of like more collaboration opportunities, is what I mean to say.
So you'd say it's something to look into, but you wouldn't consider it to be a really important thing that you would definitely have to look into or rank really highly.
Yeah, I think like if you have a group at your university, like at the schools you're considering, if you find groups that are like doing like research that you already like and are cool, I wouldn't say it's like going to be that high up. Like if you really, really are gung-ho about like, I want to meet people from different universities, go to like worldwide conferences, like that sort of thing, like, with like a lot of HAP experiments where, you're like going to be all over the world doing cool things. Like, yeah, that's definitely something to consider. But, for me, not really, like it was good that I found like research at like, these national labs, but yeah, as long as you find like a group at the university or like, wherever else, that's what matters.
Right. So is it different in astronomy? Do you need to collaborate with other people, or can you just do your own thing in a group?
Yeah, it's more of the latter. Right now, it's just me and my advisor, really. I mean, we've collaborated with a couple other people, but that's been more so when my advisor doesn't quite know all the technicalities that I need to know to do this research correctly. So then we go elsewhere. But it's a lot smaller in many subfields of astronomy. It's still nice to like have those connections where you can go and ask the questions when you need to, but we don't have 3,000 authors on our papers. I'm going to have 3 maybe.
Gotcha. What about quantum computing? So Jacob, do you do a lot of collaboration?
See, I do, because I don't go to a big quantum computing school. So I got into quantum computing after I came to MSU. And so my advisor, he loves doing all sorts of research. So even though he's mainly nuclear, he's like, oh, quantum computing, what can this do for nuclear physics? What can this do for quantum simulation? So I was able to work on this and have his support. But I was also able to, and I think you can probably do this at almost any university. I mean, I was able to meet other people through kind of other programs and just from going to certain conferences and things like that, and then start doing other projects with them. And so for me, collaboration is like a big part of my research. But I think that is especially important for me because I do an area of research that's not super big yet at my school. So it can really depend on where you go, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also related to the size of the group that's working on the particular field. So, for example, if you're quantum computing, maybe you have only a couple faculty. Maybe locally you can't really collaborate that much. But if you have a field that has 8 faculty working on it, then probably collaboration between faculty in the same department that'll be a lot more, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was just gonna say, like if you go to the University of Waterloo, they have a giant, quantum computing department. So it's a different story, So
yeah, you just walk down the hall and you probably find someone who's working on a problem. You're like, oh, I'm working on this problem. Let's see if we can mix them together or something. Jem, you work in a collaboration. I don't know. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to say that it's really nice to hear like people talk about like smaller groups. So for example, Annie is just working with her advisor, because just think about it. If I work on Atlas and it's just me and my advisor, I don't know when are we going to finish analyzing all those Atlas data. Just think about that. Like they have the data and they spread it out to universities both in the US, Asia, and Europe. That's just how much data you have. So if they don't do that, I don't know when we're going to finish. It's just impossible.
So much less data than you. Oh my gosh.
So
I'm like 2 telescopes. Wow.
So I would say I got conditioned being in a collaboration. So I think in my case, I guess George mentioned depending on the subfield. So I guess if you know which subfield you're going to, and if you know that you would have or need to be in a group that would collaborate with other groups, then collaboration opportunities is something that you should think about.
Awesome. So now we're going to move on to the 6th point, which is probably not a really important thing for me, which is location. But I think it's still something to consider, especially if you like, say, warmer climates versus colder climates. So Annie said she liked colder climates, which is blasphemy, but that's fine. We're not going to judge her live, even though I already did. But I'm curious, do people care that much about the location of the university? So let's see, Jacob, take it away.
So I think, yeah, if you really hate the cold, I mean, and you like being outside or something like that, I think it can be a big deal. My advice for this would be, get into the things that your location has to offer. So are there activities that you haven't done before that you can only do in the snow or because you're next to some beach, then give it a try. So I think it can be a cool opportunity to do something you're less familiar with. I think location is important in the sense that you're living somewhere, you're going to school, right? So I think you want to like where you live, and I think some people are less picky than others when it comes to that sort of thing. So, be honest with yourself and think about the things that you like to see in your community, I would make sure that you're going to be happy living here for potentially 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. I sort of maybe spoke too quickly, but you raised some good points about, when you're going somewhere, maybe you've never been, maybe you're leaving family, maybe you're going somewhere that's, isolated from the rest of society. So is that somewhere you want to
anyways?
So that's some good points. Jem, what do you think about the location of a university?
I did think about that quite a bit because in my undergrad, it was a really small college with 2,000 people, and our downtown was a street where you have one cinema, one cafe, and probably 2 restaurants max. So I guess I knew that if I'm going to go to grad school and stay there for 5 years, I just can't have a downtown with one street. So it has to be bigger than a street, definitely. So yeah, there needs to be like a couple of restaurants and like activities, as you said, that we could do. It's something that won't make you bored, and like another like arb that you can a park. Arboretum is a park in Ann Arbor that you could walk or run to. So those types of things that you could do to, to relieve your stress, that's something that's really important. So yes, location was a bit important in that sense, that just for things that you could do.
Right,
but not
right.
the weather though.
Yeah. George, would you say location is primary or secondary on your list when you're deciding between grad schools?
Yeah, so I feel a little bad because I think up to this point I've pretty much said everything is important.
Trying to force you between two categories.
But yeah, I think it's primary for me. It depends on the person. Like Ibrahim, you said for you, it's not the most important, and it's totally okay. I remember I talked to one PhD student, and I don't endorse their choice of phrase, but it was kind of funny the way they said it. They were like, "Look, I would rather be depressed in California than like Chicago." Well, not in Chicago, but I really like it. I grew up like very close to New York City, so I really like urban places, and like Jem said, having different places to visit, different like restaurants is just like simple thing in life, but it's just something I really enjoy. So I appreciate that. Though for me, since my pretty much all my visits were online last year, we're part of like first generation of
the Zoom
Zoom generation. So I sort of went in blind. I was like, I'd pretty much never seen Chicago. I was just like, oh, it's a city. I mean, I've heard good things about it, so why not? And I don't really mind the cold too much, being from New Jersey, so I chose it. I think for me the preference was like urban versus like I wouldn't really want to be in a place that's like more suburban or whatever, because like trying places out, and if that's your thing, then you want to go for more urban, that's good. If you want to more nature, peace and quiet, suburban or rural, that's totally fine. And it's okay not to prefer those things either, but like it is definitely personal. For me, it's important. Depending on the person, maybe not so. Yeah.
Annie, do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, sorry about that. My neighbor brought me scones. Smell delicious. We just got a new dog, and it howls endlessly, and I can hear it.
Did they take my place?
I wish, Ibrahim. I wish.
All right.
No, they're downstairs.
So we were neighbors. That's why.
I couldn't hear you ever through the walls. I always thought it was people below me.
So back to location.
Yes.
Get to know your neighbors.
Yes, pick them well. I loved Ibrahim as a neighbor. And location for me was important. I kind of touched on this already because I moved around a lot. I needed some place I was going to be entertained, and I personally like the cold, so I wanted to go up north. And Ann Arbor is, for me, a big enough city to do stuff all the time and with people, non-COVID times, and to walk everywhere. I really wanted someplace like accessible so I could walk most places. And yeah, Ann Arbor had that for me. So location was definitely a factor.
All right. So we're almost at the last item. Let's see. So last thing is course offering. I should probably expand this to say curriculum, course offering, probably quals, maybe prelims. That's probably a better characterization. But for now, it's course offering. And so if I were to start us off, I think it's important to see what kind of courses are being offered, especially if it's related to your research. So some department you're going to, and let's say you're trying to do quantum computing, but you look at their curriculum and they don't really offer any courses related to quantum computing. That means you're going to have to teach yourself the whole thing, basically. So I see Jacob nodding, and I want him to take it from me. So
just if you want to, so you should, yeah. So I think, okay, Abe, yes, looking at the course offerings is definitely the smartest thing to do. I didn't do that, but I think it would have been good to think about, well, okay, and also I didn't know that I wanted to do quantum computing. Anyways, what you might want to do is think about what research goes on at your school, because that's going to reflect a lot in the courses that get offered. So For example, there is no one does cosmology at MSU. Just no one does it. There's also no general relativity course yet. We are working on it, but is that a coincidence? Probably not. Now there is a numerical general relativity course because somebody does research on neutron stars and calculations a big part of their work. So yeah, I think it is really important because if you don't have courses that correspond to your research area, you're going to have to work a little bit harder to learn the material. I'm not the first person to do quantum computing at my school, and somebody else basically created a whole student-led seminar series just to teach himself and everyone else quantum computing. So kudos to that student, but that's a little bit of maybe of an extra commitment if your goal is just to learn your field. So definitely, I find that very important is what courses you have. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially if you're not sure about the research you want to do, or you end up switching between research areas. You want to make sure that those things that you're interested in, they have that offering that, okay, if I end up switching to cosmology, I know I can, there are Cosmo groups, there are Cosmo courses, I can quickly assimilate. George, what do you think?
Hey, so, yeah, no, I think it's important. I'm going to interpret it like you mentioned, like with the interpretation of quals and everything, like I'll say, like, if you don't have to take quals, it's good. I'm sorry, I feel bad for mentioning this. Yeah.
It's good to mention, though. I mean, it's important.
Yeah, and like each school has like so many different, like each curriculum is so different, and some can make life easier, some can make life harder. Like some schools are like, oh, just take like whatever classes you want, like just take like a certain number. Others are like, you gotta take like all these first year, all these second year, et cetera, et cetera. And there's pros and cons to each. I don't think like either one's gonna make you like a bad physicist, but some are less stressful, some are more stressful. So if you're like I really want to take fewer classes, then having fewer required classes is good. And Jacob said exactly, like having and like what Ibrahim said, like having classes in your subfield is important, so you don't have to teach yourself. Like the structure of a course makes learning material like really a lot easier than just like going by through a textbook by yourself. Can you do it? Yeah, but it's definitely easier when you're like have the routine assessment and like are working with peers, etc.
Exactly. Annie, did you look at any of the course offerings or the like the curriculum before you were deciding between grad schools?
Oh, absolutely. So I knew I wanted to do astronomy. I did physics in undergrad, and I purposefully went for schools that had a separate astronomy department because I really didn't want to take physics classes again. So I chose astronomy departments because I wanted to be much more specialized. I'd only taken a couple in undergrad, so I knew that going in. So I was able to target my applications, and when I was visiting schools, I could get more in depth with like, what would I actually have to take here? And then a couple of schools was like, oh, you'll take some E&M. And I was like, nope. So it was
I wanted to see everyone's reaction to E&M.
I'm sorry, all the physicists. I didn't have to.
No Jackson? What's the
No Jackson? I know. Unscathed. No, for me, it was important. The qual is huge. That slowly, it looks like it's going out of style. It does depend on the school still. It's very, very program dependent.
I've heard some schools take the quals way too seriously. Like they sometimes boot people off their program if people don't pass them. So that's something to look into. Like if they're super hardcore about some exam that you have to pass, then maybe that's a flag. You can color that flag, but it's a flag. Jem, what do you think about the curriculum, the course offering? Do you go through the course bulletin before you decide on university? Like I do that a lot. Like I go through, say, the courses that are offered by a certain department, and I see what do they offer here. I do that. Do you do that?
Yeah, I did it at the beginning, and I was very concerned because I went to a small college, so I didn't really have a lot of courses offered. So, for example, when we talk in the office, when there was an office. They were talking about taking two semesters of quantum mechanics, 2 semesters of E&M, 2 semesters of classical mechanics, and I've only taken 1 semester of each of them. So I was pretty nervous coming here, and it was nice that when I looked at the course selection that, we have the option of taking either the 2-level quantum or the 2-level QFT. Because if I come here and they put on QFT on me, I don't know how I'm going to survive this program. So it's good that there's that option. And also I have a story for a consequence if you don't look at the course offering. So I have my friend who went to this university, and she wants to do nuclear particle physics, and she didn't fully check if the subfield, the courses are offered every semester, but I think in this case offered every other year, which is really not really good, right? So she talked to the department like, I need to take a nuclear particle physics class so I could become a candidate next semester. And they said, well, it's not offered. You can take a solid state class. That's your choice. So I guess I don't know what to do with that. So yeah, I guess that's like one of the consequences for, inflexible course offerings.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important point, especially for people who are going to maybe a smaller university in undergrad and they didn't have say two semesters of quantum mechanics or 2 semesters of classical mechanics or whatever. Then when they go to grad school, they want to be able to sort of take the graduate level course on maybe quantum or classical, and they want to be able to get up to speed with whatever they left out in undergrad, because it's really important that, if you're in a small undergrad, you're not going to be on the same playing field as someone who's coming from a university that offered, even graduate level courses to their undergraduates. So it's very important for a university to sort of level that playing field, I'd say. So I think these are all 7 points. I probably left something out. So what I want to do is now ask you guys if you have anything you want to talk about that I didn't. Otherwise, we can go to the comments and just sort of do a Q&A now, and then we can wrap things up. So did I leave anything out? And as you're thinking, I'll be going through the comments. So I believe this question has been answered. Any thoughts? Did we cover everything? Almost everything?
I think your list was pretty complete.
Yeah, comprehensive and detailed.
Yeah, we also did expand on each one to include other things. Let's see, Shreya. How's it going, Shreya? What kind of questions to ask current grad students about their advisors? So did any of you talk with the grad students of your current advisor? Okay, I see Annie. You're nodding. Take it away.
I did not, but please. I was nodding, but I realized, wait, no, I was nodding like in thought.
No, I said Annie. I think I said Annie. I don't know.
Oh, you did. Sorry. That was about something else.
Good. Yeah, so my advisor has 2 grad students above me as well, which is great. I love working with them. I really it's like we don't have a big collaboration, so it's really nice to go to somebody else who I'm really comfortable with and talk through things, especially because I'm still taking classes and I don't know everything and can't figure out everything easily. So it's really nice to have like that collaborative atmosphere in my research. So for me, I asked them about how many times the advisor wants to meet, like hands-on versus hands-off. My advisor ended up being a little more hands-off, but I was able to communicate and work with my advisor to get out an advising situation that works well for both of us. There was asking about collaborating with, like, what were their connections? Like in the case that they didn't know everything that I was asking, or how many like fellowships would I be expected to participate in with them? Fellowship applications or grant applications. It's a lot. I just submitted one last week. And what was the other? Oh, I don't remember. Come back to me. Ask me.
We will circle back to you. If anyone has something to add, go ahead. we can. Otherwise, we'll move on to a
Oh,
different.
I remember.
Yeah, Annie, back to you. Annie.
Funding. How much funding they have normally? Do the people teach a lot? Do their grad students teach a lot? Or do they get a lot of these fellowship applications? And can they be provided? Can they be funded?
Great question. George, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think you should definitely ask them if you can like have the Thorlab snack box. Just kidding. You know, if they let the students have the snack box. But no, I think it's good to ask them about like, yeah, how much time their advisor spends with them. You know, I guess everybody has a preference for hands-on, hands-off. So you want to make sure like whatever you prefer aligns with the advisor, right? Like if you like, meeting with your advisor weekly and they like just never check in with their students, you might not have somebody to hold you accountable. Let's say, I guess talking in my experience. So having something like that is important. Funding is really important. I think sometimes the grad students won't really have like an idea. So asking the advisor directly if you get a chance is important. And I think asking them before you commit is important too, right? Because I've had friends in the situation where like they commit to a school and then the advisor's like, yeah, it's going to be a tough time taking you on because I don't have so much money. And that's not a situation you really want to find yourself in, right? So knowing if they have money to take you is, key.
Right. What about you, Jacob? Did you ask the current grad students? I saw you going the other way with your head.
I didn't ask about my particular advisor. I wish I had. I think things worked out fine for me. But I did speak with my advisor and talked to them on a few occasions and got the impression that he was a really nice guy and supportive. Like before he was my advisor, when I had gotten into MSU, we had met before that and he had sent me an email like, oh, congratulations, I saw that you got in. And so that left a good impression. So yeah, I think it's a combination of the more logistical aspects of whether they have funding or not. And also you want to make sure that there's somebody that you can work with and be open with and have a good relationship with because you're going to interact with them a lot and they're going to play a really important role in your grad school career and even going forward.
Jem, if you had one question to current grad students, what would you ask them about your future advisor?
Yeah, I did definitely ask this and it actually paid off. I asked the grad student what is my future professor's position on me going to industry or to academia, because I've heard that some professors do take it like, they have a very firm position of you going to academia and like don't give as much support if you go to industry and vice versa. So I was very happy to know that my research advisor would support me whether I would go to industry or academia. So I think that's very important to ask.
Awesome. Great points. We're going to do a speed round right now. I'll put one comment and one person will answer, and then we'll move to a next one, unless someone has something to add. So let's start. Binam asks, when you finished your undergrad or you're starting grad school, how much should you have narrowed down your research and field interests? Who wants to take this? I can take it if people are still thinking. So let's see. In undergrad, I was all over the place. I'd say I started off particle physics, then later through my senior year, I moved towards cosmology. And in grad school, I was like, let me start to do particle cosmology. So I had a big interest in Cosmo. And then I switched entirely to particle physics. So I would say in your first year of grad school, even in your undergrad, like you don't have to know what you want to do. Like as long as you have a general idea, that's completely fine. And then in your first year of grad school, that's when you start to shop around, trying to see what kind of research is being done, which sounds interesting. And then by the second year, that's when you probably need to have it pinned down. That doesn't mean you can't change later on, but the normal I say path is to have it probably down by the end of your first year. That's when you probably want to have a good idea and go to a particular advisor. But Annie does not seem to agree. So
very program dependent. I mean, we did it a completely opposite way where we picked an advisor before we started grad school. We picked it the summer before, but that's because in my program, we have the requirement that we need to submit a paper for publishment by the end of our second year, a first author paper to move on to candidacy. So we needed to have our research and advisor picked out so we could hit the ground running. Some people still change after their second year if it's really not the right fit for them. But yeah, for us, we didn't really get to shop.
So it is program dependent. That's very important. Yeah. But in general, I'd say I think most schools don't require you to have an advisor set up before you come there. So, but if I'm wrong, someone should correct me.
In
Mine didn't,
general.
so there's
Yeah.
a counterexample.
In general, I think you don't need to have someone pinned down.
George, did you have to know who your advisor was when you came in?
No. I mean, we have this weird like experimental physics requirement where like you got to do like one, like everybody has to do it. Either like you take like an advanced lab class or you do a year-long project with like a professor starting in the fall. So a lot of people come in like having like a pretty general idea of like who they want to work with, and then they like go for that. But you don't like really need to. Like it's like recommended, but not needed.
Gotcha. All right. So Shumik asks, what do you think about theory research versus experiment? How did you come to a decision? If someone's interested in both, is one necessarily better than the other for going to academia versus industry? So did one of you wrestle with this question about they weren't exactly sure if they were trying to do theory versus experiment?
I was theory versus math. I mean, someone else take it, please.
I can give like my uneducated experimentalist decision on this if that's okay. So like I mean I'll just take like half of it. For academia versus industry, I would say industry would probably just like value like being an experimentalist just because like you develop like a wider array of skills that are like you know, as an I don't know, like one of my past professors told me this really good quote that like kind of stuck with me. It was like, you can be a good experimentalist and a good theorist, but you can't be like a good theorist and good experimentalist, if that makes sense. So I mean, I feel like, you know, you can kind of pick up theory if you're an experimentalist, but you know, just by like reading papers and stuff. But the other way around is hard because, you know, you don't really get to know like hands-on techniques and stuff like that unless you like you know, you just do it yourself, right? Like, you know, you work in the lab and, you know, try and fail. So those are like sought after skills I think industry would like. You know, versus academia, I mean, you can be in academia if you're an experimentalist or theorist, you know, for sure. But yeah, I haven't wrestled with the question of theory versus experiment, so I definitely like can't answer that.
I think in my case, it was my undergrad research experience that sort of pushed me towards theory because most of my undergrad research was either computational or experimental. So I did not really like to do hands-on things. I did not like to work in a lab. So that sort of pushed me away from doing hands-on experiment and more towards computational stuff or theoretical stuff. So I would say if you can do undergrad research, just, you know, try it out, see what you like. That's really, really important. And grad schools do appreciate it and they do look at it. So a question from Amr, how do you guys manage the stress of grad school?
Ice cream.
Ice cream.
Sometimes I don't.
Sometimes we don't.
That's okay.
Yeah. You got to do stuff that's outside of just school. You have to go to the gym. You have to play sports. You have to read. I don't know. Annie, what do you do?
Have them cancel the prelim. Maintain your hobbies. Like, remember, I think one of the hardest things in grad school is really losing your focus about why you love your field so much. Like, what was that big picture idea that got you to do this in the first place? And for me, it was trying to remember that drive to keep going and get through the really, really tough times. There was always playing tennis with Ibrahim. It was always a great time. And just getting out a little bit, get out of my apartment and get out of my head. Honestly, that helped me a lot.
George, what about you? What do you do in your free time?
Me, so I'm a big, I don't know, I'm not like I'm particularly great at it, but like I'm an amateur photographer, so I do that for fun. And yeah, I think what Annie said about getting out is like really important, you know, especially for me because like my first year has been entirely online. Like, you know, it's really easy to spend just like literally several days inside without going out. Then you go out and you're like, oh my god, it's like holy smokes, it's like The outside world exists. So going outside and like taking a walk has been good for me. Maintaining my hobbies definitely has been good for me. Like like I think it's very easy to like get stuck in the rut of like doing homework or doing like something for research, and to the point of like diminishing returns. Like you're just spending time on it without like actually doing anything, and just cultivating stress. You're not doing anything. So I think it's important to recognize when you get into something like that, and then just take a break. Like have dinner, like watch some YouTube. Just do whatever like will make you relaxed and give you some
Relieve you. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Let's see. What did I want to say? Oh yeah. Quick shout out to Blake, who's in the comments. Thank you, Blake. We appreciate it. So I think we can call it. I don't know. It's about an hour, 20 minutes. It's about good enough, I'd say. So thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed doing the stream, and thank you to everyone who was watching live. And if you're not watching live, oh yeah, Blake, thank you. We hope to do more of these streams. Any last words?
You got this.
Annie.
If you don't get into grad school the first time, it's not a reflection that you are a failure.
Good last words. We'll probably end with that. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a good one.